Hi, everybody. Today's topic is PTP CloudOps, your AWS engineering partner for biotech innovation. This is Meyer Media on behalf of PTP, and joining me today is Mike from PTP. Mike, thanks so much for joining me.
John, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Mike, let's dive into things a little bit. What is CloudOps at PTP?
So, CloudOps is a service that we sort of thought up back in 2019. We realized that customers of ours and prospects needed on-demand engineering services around AWS. They needed to be able to have someone to call with a service level agreement that was relatively quick to get things done in AWS, so the person that was doing the work that they were doing could act quickly, could get things going, and be successful in their tasks on a hour-to-hour basis. So that's what CloudOps, our support agreement, is all about. It's about providing on-demand expert engineers to build an AWS effectively and at the right price.
Mike, we've heard you say that PTP's clients are building a house in the cloud and that PTP is the hammer. Can you explain that metaphor?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you think about metaphors are very important for people like me to understand what the heck's going on. But when you think about these folks that work with us, our focus is in the life science space, and typically we're working with scientists, and scientists use a lot of tools and analyze a lot of data, and they do that on platforms like AWS. And AWS infrastructure can be likened to a house, right? You're utilizing software applications to do your job as a scientist. And if you don't have that application running in a solid house, one that was built effectively from the ground up, you're not going to be successful overall with your work and with your data analytics. That's an effort to get you to the end therapy that you're driving towards. So we are actually the construction workers, if you will, or the hammer that can build up that house so that your analytics and your pipelines can run effectively and you can get to your end goal.
Mike, it feels like it's important to have a solid foundation, not only at home, but in the cloud.
No question. Security, you know, uh, running on the right sized platform so your costs are contained. There's so many different things that you have to look at, and you have to build it well. Otherwise, you know what? It's like you're living in a tent in a snowstorm.
That's a really good analogy. Mike, it's been reported that CloudOps is PTP's most purchased managed service offering. Can you explain why it's resonating so well with biotech clients?
Yes, absolutely. We focus in the startup to early stage life science company in that space, and what we realized early on is that these scientists, they typically, when they have an idea and come up with a plan to build a company, they find these ideas and discover these ideas at universities, in a lab that's actually funded by Harvard or the Broad Institute or UC Berkeley or Princeton. Now, in those situations with those people, they don't have the experience that they need to build that house we were talking about earlier. They don't. They know enough to be dangerous, and they could figure it out because they're all smart people. They're all PhDs, and they could probably Google and dig in and spend countless hours to figure out how to build things. But in the end, that's not good use of their time. So what we found is that if we build a service that allows these individuals to get in touch with an expert that can actually stand up these environments quickly, we found that customers were really jumping on that. And the other thing about the service is the cloud itself. If you're familiar with AWS, it's an on-demand service, meaning you can turn it up and turn it down as you need it. We sort of built our agreements in a similar fashion. So we can start out really, small with you and say, hey, you know what? We know that to build your initial foundation, it's going to take us about 60 hours of time. Let's spread that out over 6 months, and we'll sort of create a flexible billing platform so that as the business grows, we can consume it as an OpEx versus CapEx, which a lot of these companies that we work with, they really appreciate. So that's why I think CloudOps as a service for us has been so successful, and why it's probably our leading product right now.
Mike, one of the important things when I always talk with PTP is in the biotech industry, you have very intelligent people, the scientists, everybody that's focusing on solving a problem. Let them focus on the data that's produced and analyzing and solving a problem, and let the experts handle the underlying infrastructure so that you can solve that problem.
Yes, I mean, in anything you do, right, you got to be focused. PTP is focused on building platforms in AWS for scientists so that they can do their analytics. Like you said, they can visualize and check out whether or not their idea, their molecule is actually impacting a cell the way they think it's going to, or the way they want it to. Those scientists have a lot of work there, right? That's what they should focus on. We're the ones that can focus on building the infrastructure and the platforms for them to actually get to that end result, to that visualization result. So, you said it. You gotta be focused, and you have to make sure that everyone's in their lane doing their thing to be successful.
I'm going to go back to before of building a solid foundation. And the example is you have a realtor, right? And their expertise is selling the house, not building the house.
Mm-hmm.
Let the builders actually build the house, hand it off to the realtor so that they can do their jobs. Everybody is an expert in their field. And this is how I look at cloud ops with PTP and how it comes to the biotech clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you think about the effort we made as a company back in 2019 when we committed to life sciences. We had to go through a rigorous process to become what AWS calls a life science competent partner, right? So we made the commitment to become experts, right? So that we could be, in that lane of helping life science startups and early stage companies build what they need to build to be successful and get their drug to market as quickly as possible. So in the end, I couldn't agree more. Being focused and doing the things that you and the team have committed to is important to success.
Mike, walk me through the process. How do you get involved or how do you start with cloud ops and track
Mhm.
your progress over time?
So most of our customers come to us either through introductions from AWS or through introductions from our existing clients. We do also do a lot of networking out there in the field. So these companies we sometimes will find out what they're up to in the media, because when companies get funding, it's very widely reported. um, but how we get going is we just start to have a conversation about the tools that they expect to use. These are the scientists or the bioinformaticians, and once we sort of understand the tools and the products like Nextflow and Batch and SnakeMake and Slurm, a lot of different types of softwares, and AlphaFold and R Shiny. There are a ton of these softwares that these scientists use to visualize their data. Once we understand what they're using, we got them, because we can tell them a story about the expertise we have of building out these infrastructures to support the software, and all these things together make this data analytics possible. So the conversation starts like I just laid out, and then it's as simple as, based on our experience, we know it's going to take X amount of hours to get you to your first jumping off point, and we form an agreement based on those necessary hours, and we track it literally weekly with the customer to make sure that all the things we're committing to are being delivered on. And from there, once that trust and once the customer sees that we can do a good job for them, the relationship will bloom into something more. Sometimes cloud ops is very important in the beginning, but then the customer needs desktop support operations help. They need network management because they built an office. They need security. They need a whole host of other products and services in the technology space that PTP can deliver. So our business starts with cloud ops, as we talked about. The engagement model is simple. It's an easy to consume model, similar to AWS, and from there we usually forge really strong relationships up until FDA approval for these companies.
Mike, my last question for you is can you share some of the interesting cloud engineering work that PTP has done with their biotech clients?
Sure. When I think about some of the startups that have gone from zero to to the point where they're through the clinic and now going for their FDA approval. One such client, a Boston-based company that's in the trying to create a therapy for epilepsy. When we first started with them, their cloud presence was literally tiny. They forged a relationship with a CRO, a clinical research organization. They started receiving data from experiments that the CRO was performing for them. But the way they were receiving the data just wasn't really effective. It was thumb drives and FedEx and data dumps that just weren't effective over the internet. We got involved and fixed that problem so that CRO could seamlessly send data to an AWS account of the client. The S3 environment was important to them at that point. From there, after about a year or so, they started to bring some of the wet lab clinical experiments, wet lab experiments into their own lab. Then we took over, helping them deploy a LIMS system so that all the instruments that they were putting in the lab were connected to the cloud effectively. And literally every step of the way through this company's life cycle, we were there to come up with the best architectures to support the software and the data-driven applications to get them to their end result, which over the course of 4.5, 5 years, they're through the clinic and now are actually looking for FDA approval. So I think that's a great example of how we can start with a company when they're 5, 6, 8 employees, and 4 years later, when these companies are run well and doing the right things, they're getting ready for FDA approvals. And we've been there every step of the way to make sure that they didn't overspend. We make sure that their environments are secure, and we make sure that their workflows are automated and performing the way they need to.
Mike, that was great, and we really appreciate you explaining how PTP CloudOps is your AWS engineering partner for biotech innovation. This is Meyer Media on behalf of PTP.